So I'm going to take you through my evening feeding routine for my mice and my rats, and that always starts with prepping fresh food for them. I think about mice and rats' bodies in the same way I would think about a human body. Whilst they do have their dry food pellets, and if they are balanced and complete, they do give them the nutrients they need, they also need other nutrients that come from regular fresh food as well. It's also much more interesting for them. I liken it to thinking about cereal. If we were to eat cereal every single day, now I'm sure there are some people out there who would enjoy that, but the majority of us would get really bored. So I think it's really important for them to have these experiences of new, exciting and different foods. So this evening I'm prepping cucumber and avocado. I'm also going to be giving them olives for the very first time. That's something that many people might not know, but olives are actually extremely good for especially rats, but mice really enjoy them too. There are some foods that I just wouldn't give to them every single day. So olives, for example, are naturally high in salt content, so I wouldn't give them to them every day. Avocado is naturally high in fat, so again, that's something that they love, but I wouldn't give it to them every single day. Whereas something that is high in water content like cucumber or something like carrots, which is really good to help them keep their teeth short, they're things that are good daily options. But again, sometimes I'll do cooked vegetables and sometimes I'll do raw. Other days I mix up things like fruits or maybe nuts and seeds. So just making sure that they get a really balanced diet over the entire week in exactly the same way as I would think about my own balanced diet. So at the moment I actually have 4 mouse enclosures and I have 1 rat enclosure. So I'm starting with my first mouse enclosure, and in here we have Crumble, Billy, Houdini and Licorice. And they're in the modular home that I've recently set them up. I'm just waiting for my extensions to arrive and I'm going to be making this much bigger for them. So let's see what Crumble thinks of this olive. Oh my goodness, I think it's a hit. So I tend to put their wet food items into a bowl because this is just going to keep it a lot more hygienic for them. And then their dry food I scatter all around their enclosure because the dry food pellets are really good for them to forage. So next I make sure their water bowls are clean and also their water bottle. I always use a bowl and also a bottle because you might have noticed when I first opened the enclosure the bottle had fallen down. So maybe a bottle falls off or it stops working and then they don't have access to water. So it's important for them to have a bowl as well. But there is a second reason, and that is that mice do like to clean themselves, so having access to a bowl of water in which they can groom themselves and keep themselves clean is really important. I tend to use a lukewarm water, except if it's a really hot day, then I'll use a cold water. But I am also conscious that cold water suddenly hitting their tummy isn't a very pleasant experience, so I do tend to not have it too cold. At this point, I leave their enclosure lid open for a while, at least whilst I'm doing the rest of the enclosures. And that is because it's really nice for them to just be able to explore, but also then I can see which one of them wants to come out and play. Maybe it's all of them, it might just be one, and some nights none of them want to come out. Sometimes they just want to bumble around. So it's really about me not pushing what I want onto them, but instead seeing what they want instead. And often if I am filming, obviously I would wait until the time that they wake up. So I'll often film later in the afternoon once they're kind of starting to wake up. Next I move on to Bob's enclosure. Bob is my senior male mouse. When I first got him from the RSPCA, they weren't sure what age he was. But judging by his speed now, I'm pretty confident that he's quite elderly. And so he tends to have his own enclosure space. I have had him with other male mice before when he had baby sons and they got on really well. He's so wonderfully natured, and I think that it actually is possible to keep male mice together if they are family or siblings that have grown up together. But it does mean that you have to monitor it because of course aggression can set in and then they would need to be separated. But Bob's so chilled out that I just found he was so beautiful with his sons. Now, I did have a lot of mice, and so many of those mice did go to new homes. And I actually did see that Bob grieved a lot. So for that reason, he's getting a lot of attention, a lot of human contact time, because he is on his own at the moment. And he's at that age where I personally don't want to put him through being neutered, because I just think on his older body, that would just be so much for him to go through. So instead, he comes out each evening and he hangs out with us and then has his own space during the day to sleep. So again, I scatter his dry food all around his enclosure, and I also put it inside that little toilet roll, and it's got holes in the top because sometimes I like to put almonds in the top as like a bit of a chew toy for him. Houdini is my most adventurous mouse, and when I first got her, the wire enclosure that she came with, she actually used to squeeze through the bars. So it's really important that when you get a mouse enclosure, it has the right bar spacing. But it's also important for her, I recognise, to let her have that time where she can feel like she can do that. So giving mice freedom and feeling like they are in control of some of what they choose to do, I believe is really important. So next up we have Bramble and Fawn's enclosure. Fawn is Bramble's baby. So I had to separate Bramble and Houdini because when Bramble had her babies, she changed in personality and became very, very territorial, to the point that even once the babies had grown up, she would no longer accept any of the older girls coming near her. And Houdini and Bramble ended up having a full-on fight on several occasions where blood was drawn, and I realized that it was a massive welfare issue and I had to separate them. So I made sure that Bramble stayed with her baby Fawn, because Fawn had never lived with the other girls anyway, so they could be happy together and have each other for company. My fourth mouse enclosure is a really big mouse enclosure because this is for my Spinifex hopping mice. Spinifex hopping mice are very wild in nature. They don't really like to necessarily come out and be held and things like that, although they are actually really starting to warm to me, and they do like to have a cuddle. They're very, very fast though. I have had one jump out of the enclosure before and literally hop all over the living room. So I haven't quite worked out playpen ideas for them yet, which is why they have a huge enclosure, and instead I'm adding to that all the time, and I switch it up and make sure it's really interesting for them. In the wild, they live in colonies together of boys and girls, but the colonies are generally quite small. Right now I have 6, so I have 3 babies and 3 adults, and they all get on really well. Of course they have their odd spats, but it is normal for Spinifex hopping mice to live in a mixed sex colony. So as these guys do tend to spend more time in their enclosure than my house mice and rats, I do try and spend a lot of time with them doing things like this, like holding my hand out with food, bonding with them that way. And like I said, again, just always adding in new and interesting things into their enclosure and making sure their enclosure is really, really big. So I've got a huge reptile tank that's probably designed really for a large snake or something like that, but it's basically like one that you would see in the zoo, so that they can just have a lot of space to run around in. In the early days, they wouldn't accept a wheel, but they have now really started to enjoy having a wheel, so I've popped that in their enclosure too. I've noticed that my hopping mice really enjoy jumping into their bowl of water, so I always provide them with lukewarm water in the evening so they can just have fun. Obviously they like to drink it, but also they do seem to like to play in it as well. And finally, my rats, just chilling there like little puppies on the sofa. They come out every evening and they literally just hang out with us. Olive. That is the very first olive that they're about to try, and I think it's a hit again. Taking it off and hiding behind the couch cushion. So yeah, typically we'll start off in the living room, and then later on we'll go into our bedroom, and I have a big pet blanket that I put down on the bed, and I take their cardboard box in and things like that, and their toys, and then we have some playtime on the bed. I find that rats are really funny because they tend to get the zoomies just like puppies do, and so they'll have this big bout of energy, we'll do some playing, and then they'll just kind of chill out and lie down again. So yeah, they tend to stay out with us until we're going to bed, and then I'll put them into their enclosure, and that way then they also get their own time throughout the night that they can just do their thing in their enclosure. So it's a really nice mix. I do work from home. Obviously I'm building my YouTube channels and I'm really concentrating hard on that. So I work from home full time, and so I do get a lot of time with them, and I have got that opportunity, which I'm really grateful for. With my rats, I definitely have a water bowl and a water bottle. Again, not only because it's in case the water bottle stops working or falls down or something like that, but also because rats are super clean animals. Contrary to the belief that many people have about rats and the myths that fly around about them being dirty, they are actually really, really clean, and they love keeping themselves clean, and they enjoy playing with water, so it's important to have that there. So once I know all the pets are fed and watered, I'll come and have a little play. Once I do head into the bedroom later on, obviously I close up their enclosure, but it's just nice for me to know that they have at least had that bit of free roam time and just the feeling like having bigger space and not just being cooped up in a little cage.